We love it when Dr. Akina is on the program because Dr. Keli'i Akina runs the Grassroot Institute, which is a think tank. It may be the only place that actually thinks in the state of Hawaii. At times, we're pretty sure of that. And Dr. Akina also on the OHA board, by the way. He is one of the brightest guys I know, and so we have to ask him a bunch of questions. There's a lot going on right now. First of all, Dr. Akina, first of all, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it. Tell us about the COVID lockdowns. Tell us about the new ones. What's the update? How do you read this?
Well, good morning to you, Michael, and to all of the listeners. This is a tough issue because on one hand, we absolutely respect and support the role of government in protecting public health. That's absolutely paramount. But at the same time, we've got to balance that with the need for liberty and protecting our rights. And, in terms of the management of the lockdown, it's kind of like we're taking two steps backward and one step forward at the same time, if you know what I mean. It's really been about 525 days since the first lockdown began, and that was supposed to have ended after about 45 days. It's going on forever. You recall, Michael, we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, how we moved finally into Tier 5.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, that was a big surprise to everybody because we were in Tier 4 and we discovered, wait, there's more. But now we're being told we're not going back to Tier 4, but if you look at it carefully, a lot of the requirements of Tier 4 have been moved up to Tier 5.
Oh, gee.
And I don't want to confuse anyone, but it really is confusing, and that's part of the problem, the lack of transparency with all of this.
I'm glad you brought up transparency. And by the way, we urge people to do their own research about lockdowns, masks, all of that. It's all out there, okay? Masks are not a new thing. We've known about masks, what they do and what they don't do for a long time. Lockdowns, the same thing. You're talking about transparency. I think it was a year and a half ago, the governor suspended our open records law. I'm not sure why that happened. Maybe you can tell us. But the good news is you guys have been really pushing for this like a pit bull group that you are. And last Thursday, I think the governor lifted the suspension. Now, what does that mean for us?
Well, right. But first, let me describe what the government open records law actually does, or what it says. It says that the public, that's you, Mike, and me, including the media, has the right to look at government documents. Now, that's an essential component of democracy. It helps shine a light on what government is doing behind the scenes. Now, if you recall back in March of 2020, when the pandemic broke out, Hawaii became one of the only states to suspend its government transparency laws. So now we want to give kudos to Governor Ige. It did take him a while, but we think he did something right by restoring transparency law.
Okay. Did that make your job harder? You're always trying to get documents and everything, and I remember the Education Institute tried for like a decade to try to get the budget out of the Department of Education, and they couldn't. It's the Department of Public Education, but we couldn't get the public documents because they were private. Didn't make any sense. Your job had to get a lot harder during all of this.
Oh, absolutely. During the last year and a half with suspended public transparency laws, it made it really hard to get information. Let me give you one example. The Grassroot Institute requested copies of the governor's communication about something very simple. What was he telling his Department of Health, or what was he telling the tourism industry? What were these organizations, these agencies saying back to the governor about how to handle the coronavirus crisis?
Yeah.
But we didn't get it. Our request was put on ice during that time, and we had these suspended public transparency laws. It was a really tough deal. So we had to get together with a bunch of other fine organizations like the Civil Beat Law Center, as well as Common Cause Hawaii, and send a letter to Governor Ige requesting that the law be reinstated. And that's why I want to be fair. He's finally reinstated it, so it's going to make our job a lot easier. But here's the real problem. We still have not been able to figure out why certain measures are enacted. why it is that you can walk along a sidewalk, but if you put your foot across onto the grass in the park, you'd be in violation of the law, and so forth. Who makes these decisions? What data is it based on? That simply is not out there, and we really need more transparency.
Pretty sure that all of our politicians and bureaucrats are talking to other politicians and bureaucrats. Science left this whole thing a long time ago, around the time where you could traverse the beach to get to the water, but not actually sit on a beach in the state of Hawaii. Remember those great days? Oh, boy. Hey, moving on. The Jones Act and the Passenger Vessel Services Act. This is cruise ships and freight. This means something to every single person in the state of Hawaii. The Jones Act has been with us for 100 and... How old is it, Kaylee?
It's 100 years this year. It's the century birthday. And a lot of people know about the Jones Act because it handles cargo that goes between United States ports, but they don't know there's a very similar act, just as old, called the PVSA, or the Passenger Vessel Services Act, that handles people in the same way as the Jones Act does.
And that's the one that has to do with cruise ships and everything. Kaylee was on the mainland. He was doing a debate with somebody, and the word that came out was that person had to crawl under his desk afterwards or something. You mopped the floor with the person you were debating about the Jones Act because they came up with the same old excuses for it, and there are none, unfortunately. Go ahead. How did you win that debate?
Well, that was a lot of fun, Michael. It was held in South Dakota, of all places, underneath Mount Rushmore, a national debate. And we had the opportunity to face off on some of the great defenders of the Jones Act. And, these are fine people, but their arguments are old and they're easy to defeat. I'll give you two of them in particular. Number one, they were arguing that the Jones Act is essential for our national defense. And we were able to show that that's simply no longer the case. Yeah. We just don't do warfare the way we did at the end of World War I. In addition to that, they argued that the Jones Act helped protect jobs of seafarers and shipbuilders and so forth. All I did was trot out the data and shows that there's been a huge plummet in all these jobs and the shutting down of shipbuilding centers and so forth since the Jones Act. And so we pointed out that there are a whole bunch of myths that are out there. And in fact, Michael, we've got a report produced by the Grassroots Institute called The 5 Myths of the Jones Act, and that's available at grassrootsinstitute.org for free.
And you should really, if you're wondering why things cost so much in the state of Hawaii, read that, and you'll know. It's so simple, grassrootsinstitute.org. Kaylee, always great to talk to you. We like doing these kind of long-form interviews because we learn a lot, and so does everybody listening. We appreciate it. Have a great day.
Wonderful to be with you and the posse, Michael. Aloha.